realistically, how long do you think you can keep government, keep controlling government?
Well, look, I think every day you wake up and you continue to make things better for Canadians. You know, today we were just able to announce the autism framework and strategy. That's incredibly important. And I would say that I've been in a lot of minority parliaments. This is my fifth.
So you know how tenable they are.
Yeah, and I think that there's going to be a lot more in our country's future. And I think that we should focus on making them work. I think we should focus on getting things done. I think we should focus on the fact that we had an election. We're supposed to have 4 years to get things done. And if we're going to keep having minority governments, maybe it provides, some entertainment for some to talk about politics all the time. But I think what people actually want us to do is focus on the things they elected us to do, which is they chose a minority government. They expect that government to work together. So the question, the way I would answer your question is, this Parliament should continue to put working together and finding solutions first. Look, it's easy to give up and go and have another election, but then you just have another and another and another. Okay,
speaking of elections, you could have a fall election. It could be a winter election. Is the Liberal Party ready for that?
Well,
because you keep setting yourself up like you're going to an October election next year. What if you're in an election in a couple months?
Well, look, as I said, I've been this is my sixth term, my fifth minority parliament. You always have to be ready for an election. But I also learned from that period that if you live in this, is there an election space, then you don't get things done. What you need to do is wake up and focus on the people that you serve. I don't even know if I'm going to be alive tomorrow. I said this earlier today. You wake up with the time you're given and do your best. And then later on you worry about making your case to people. But I think that the best politics is having people out there with their whole heart and mind trying to make things better for people. And then you have an election to talk about what you did or didn't do. Everybody's in a rush to have an election now, like it's some kind of year-long writ period. No, there's going to be a time to debate parties and choice. We live in a democracy. That's coming.
But if there was an election now, are you ready for it?
Always ready for an election. You live in a state of eternal preparedness because that's what life is. You don't know what's going to come, so you're always ready. But that readiness takes very much a back seat to getting the job done, and that's where I'm focused. Thanks a lot.
Monsieur Fortin, pour nos collègues à Québec, là, vous avez vu que la CAQ, le Parti québécois, demande à ce que vous accordez votre confiance au gouvernement Trudeau. Il y a un engagement de réduire l'immigration temporaire.
Oui.
Vous pensez quoi de ça?
Ben moi, j'écoute, notre chef a répondu assez clairement à ça. On a posé deux exigences qui m'apparaissent tellement, non seulement louables, mais faciles à rencontrer. Donc maintenant, la balle est dans le camp des libéraux. Pour le reste, je fais confiance à mon chef et puis à notre leader en chambre pour négocier les détails de tout ça.
L'immigration temporaire, il n'y aurait pas pu mettre quelque chose là-dedans? Ou tu sais, quand Québec demande ça...
Encore une fois, là, je vais m'en remettre à ce que le chef du Bloc nous a dit là-dessus. Et on a le porte-parole en immigration, Alexis, qui intervient à peu près chaque jour en chambre sur ces questions-là. Je pense que c'est un dossier majeur, l'immigration, et j'espère effectivement...
Is there too much bullying in the House of Commons?
Quoi?
Are the Conservative Party bullies?
Je sais pas, je pensais qu'elle me parlait, mais regardez quelqu'un d'autre. OK,
ben, vous avez dit j'espère que, puis vous n'avez pas fait
j'espère, j'aimerais qu'on en arrive à une entente, qu'on règle ces choses-là. Il y a des choses tellement évidentes, tout le monde s'entend là-dessus, là, à moins d'être de mauvaise foi. Donc, il reste simplement qu'à poser des gestes concrets pour, comme on dit chez nous, que les bottines suivent les babines.
Merci.
Yesterday in the House of Commons, I rose on a point of order that was asking the Speaker to investigate a potential claim of homophobic slur or remark that was made. I know many Canadians are troubled by this. They're troubled by it because they see what's manifesting in the House of Commons in their streets. I know this deeply and personally from my community of Edmonton-Griesbach. We see it, whether it's schools, playgrounds, or even sports. We're seeing the 2S LGBTQI community taking a hit, and we're seeing far-right extremists punching down at a time when Canadians need us to unite, Canadians need us to be compassionate, and Canadians need us to be role models for what it means to live in a diverse and inclusive and pluralistic society. I grew up in a small Indigenous community. I learned a lesson in that community about what it means to be strong, what it means to grow together. Diverse forests are the best forests. Forests that can welcome anyone, and they can contribute their talents, their strengths, and their ideas, and that's what Canada is, a forest that is diverse and should welcome every single opinion so that we can make our country stronger. The potential issue of what took place yesterday in the House of Commons, to which I've asked the Speaker to investigate, is serious. A claim of homophobia that the Prime Minister felt as though he had an attack of a homophobic nature, and it's one that I would stand up on a point of order for any members of the House of Commons, for any of my colleagues. If and where hate takes place, we must have the courage to challenge it. And that's exactly what I did yesterday, and I hope that the Speaker will rule on this soon and come to a conclusion of not allowing this kind of vitriolic hatred that's manifesting in the House of Commons, because we're seeing it take place on the streets. I want to be really clear. A lot of Canadians right now are counting on us to be role models. They're needing us to be examples of decency, respect, and hard work. We have no time, while Canadians are struggling with the cost of living, to continue to squabble on far-right culture war, divisive issues when we have so much ahead of us. The Parliament needs to work, and it needs to actually get results for people. We have serious issues ahead of us that we need the courage to stand with dignity and respect for one another and all of our colleagues to getting the work of these serious issues done.
What did you actually hear being said, and who said it?
I want to refrain from answering that question directly, because I asked the Speaker of the House of Commons that question. It's up to members of Parliament, it's up to the Speaker actually, to address the question you're asking. That's what I asked him in the House of Commons, because what took place was one of my colleagues rose and said that they suffered a homophobic slur. If anyone in this room was told me that someone just said something homophobic to them, I would challenge that and ask for evidence and ask for an explanation. So that's what I asked the Speaker.
You didn't hear it, and you can't really say whether it's homophobic or not.
Well, I did hear it.
You did hear the remark.
I did hear the remark, but I want the Speaker to clarify and verify what was heard, because I want to take this issue seriously. It's important that we get the exact wording and the exact person who said it without speculating. I think that's fair to ask.
So if you actually heard it, did you go up to the individual who said it and ask that person, what did you mean by it, or are you leaving everything with the Speaker?
I want to leave everything to the Speaker to ensure that we have an accurate account of what took place, that we can come from a verified position to address the concerns and take them seriously. Look, these issues are really easy to politicize, whether they're in community or whether they're here in the House of Commons. I take my job very seriously. I speak to a lot of people every single day who face hate, who face discrimination, and who feel as though Canada is no longer a home for them. That breaks my heart. The best way to cut through that is to challenge it with fact, is to challenge it and confront it, and to hopefully get real accountability for those who spew hate. We need the Speaker to rule on this so that we can have an accurate account of what was said and who said it. I think that's a very fair and reasonable position for what was a very disruptive and difficult moment for parliamentarians yesterday.
But do you think the image that apparently is being ascribed to a Conservative MP, the idea that Tom Clark was in the bathtub with somebody else, maybe world leaders, maybe with the Prime Minister, is that inherently homophobic, or is that kind of like sounds kind of like an editorial cartoon?
Well, if that's what you heard, of course,
well,
maybe.
That's what I heard on the tape, yeah.
Yeah, that's what you heard, of course. But I want to have a clear transcript from the Speaker, whose job it is to ensure decorum, and I'd be happy to take questions after we have a verifiable account of what took place. I just want to be serious about this issue and take a concerned issue, because I want the Speaker to make a ruling about it.
Is there any indication he won't?
He did say yesterday that he's going to take that under advisement, and he may return to the House. And so I'm encouraging my parliamentarian colleagues to take this issue seriously and to ensure that the Speaker of the House of Commons actually comes with a very reasonable request of the information we've asked for. We'd acknowledge our reasonable request for the information we asked for, which is a transcript from the Blues. There's people who get paid in the House of Commons to listen to every single word that was spoken. We must have a transcript. I reviewed the tape myself. I want to reserve my comments on what I thought I heard, because that's a matter of debate right now. And so we need to have the same shared facts. That's how we combat disinformation, is making sure we have a verifiable fact to debate.
What do you think Canadians are thinking when they tune in to watch their elected representatives and they're making jokes about bathtubs and the Prime Minister's talking about defecating? I mean, does this not seem juvenile at a certain point and turn people off from politics in general, whether or not the comment was or may not have been homophobic?
I really appreciate that question. It's something I have to deal with deeply often, is this question as to whether or not we have the right place to debate the right issues with the right level of respect. And I'd say right now it's a really difficult position for parliamentarians, because we're not even dealing with the same facts. We need to be role models for Canadians. We have a lot of people counting on us. They're facing the largest one of the largest affordability crises they've ever had. They're facing hatred on their streets. We're seeing women harassed. We're seeing 2S LGBTQ kids in my province of Alberta being told they don't belong in schools. Like, this is serious. And we need to be able to be role models in this place, and we need to get over the personal attacks. We need to get over the spewing of these little comments that are seeking to divide the chamber and are seeking to create disruption. I know that we can work together. I used to represent an Indigenous government, and those are a very big gap to fill between Canada's institutions and Indigenous people. But I believe in that mission of bringing people together. That's what our treaties were founded on, of us coming together with respect, us coming together with honor, and trying to come to a place where everyone has a chance to benefit from this great country. Canada's an amazing place, but we have to make sure it stays that way.
When do you expect a ruling from the Speaker? Any idea?
I really hope it's today, which is why I'm coming to the mic. I really hope that we can have an explanation from the Speaker today. It would be immensely important that we challenge hatred when it is presented, and if that's what happened, we need to challenge it. If it's not what happened, of course, then we can dismiss this issue, but it's something that I take seriously, and I think Canadians take seriously because they're counting on us to be serious, they're counting on us to be respectful, and they're counting us to be role models. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that.
Are you, this is a real toughie, are you going to support the confidence motion of Mr. Poilievre today?
No.
And what do you make of
I will support Mr. Poilievre, never, likely.
Okay. And Mr. Genes's statement after question period?
Horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. It was horrendous that the Speaker allowed that to happen, and it's disgusting that that member refuses to apologize for a homophobic slur in the House of Commons. It makes this an unsafe work environment for so many of us. It's disgusting.
We watched Mr. Scheer sort of crook his finger and say, call Garnet, and bring him into the lobby before he stood up. So do you think Mr. Scheer had some words?
Well, this is just it, right? The Conservatives can't control their lunatic fringe. And frankly, there's more and more of the lunatic fringe than regular members of Parliament at the moment.
What do you make of the whole Garnet-Genes statement after?
Oh my, I haven't had time to really digest that, but...
I mean, when he stood up after question period, after Scheer pulled him behind the curtains.
I think, yeah, well, who knows what was going on back there. The key here, in my opinion, and this is not necessarily based on what I know about House procedures, it isn't what you intended to say, it's how it's received. And, a lot of very, very reasonable people perceive that to be a homophobic, comment. So it would have been just simple for, Mr. Genes to stand up and say, I regret that it was received in that way and I apologize. That would have been really simple, it's all over. But that's the character of the Conservative Party. Take no prisoners, never apologize, and and basically disrespect the House. That's what they do.
Thank you for stopping. Good to see you.
All right.
Mr. Oliphant, I'm going to ask you on Lebanon, does Canada need to do more to get citizens out?
At Canada, we're monitoring every situation constantly. Right now, there is a call for a ceasefire is what we're doing. So the first thing we're trying to do is the protection of all civilians, including Canadians. For months, we have been talking about getting Canadians out, having them come out, and we have contingency plans all the time for evacuation.
Yeah, the foreign minister said there's still commercial flights, but when you look at the Beirut airport departure boards, most of them are cancelled. Is that really a legitimate advice to Canadians?
We still advise Canadians to search for commercial opportunities, but we have contingency plans as well.
Bon après-midi, tout le monde. My name is Adam Van Couverden. I'm the Member of Parliament for Milton. I'm also the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change and to the Minister of Sport, Physical Activity and Recreation. That's why I'm wearing my running shoes today. It's Sneak It In Day with Participaction, but I'm not here to talk about physical activity. I'm here today to talk about how Pierre Poilievre is directly lying to Canadians. Pierre Poilievre has made it clear that he and the Conservatives want to scrap all the clean fuel regulations that are keeping our air and water clean enough to breathe the air and clean enough to drink the water. These clean fuel regulations are tremendously important to ensure that when we use fossil fuels, we're not doing undue harm to our natural environment. But more than that, he also wants to remove the industrial pricing mechanisms which are helping us achieve our climate goals. We know that we need to reduce our emissions to reduce the impact that we're having on the natural environment. Climate change is having a devastating impact on our economy, on Canada, particularly this summer when we saw with wildfires, that Canada is quite vulnerable to these extreme weather events. And in 2023, in fact, 40% of the people around the world who were displaced from their homes because of wildfires were actually Canadians, out of only a population of 40 million people. That's really devastating. But Pierre Poilievre knows that the Canada carbon rebate is an affordability mechanism. He uses these incredibly vitriolic terms like nuclear winter, describing the impacts that carbon pricing has on the Canadian economy, which there's a net benefit to the 8 out of 10 households as, these overblown statements. They're akin to Donald Trump saying that immigrants are eating pets. It's over the top, it's unnecessarily vitriolic, and it's completely untrue. We know that carbon pricing is driving down our emissions in Canada. It's having a positive impact on our commitments with respect to the Paris Accord and many other international commitments to reduce our emissions. But we also know why he's doing that. We know who's funding these campaigns. It's because he's attending these elite fundraisers with oil and gas CEOs and millionaires who are committed to driving our emissions up. We've heard Andrew Scheer say many, many times in this House that he thinks Canadian emissions are somehow superior, that we ought not to reduce our emissions, and that it doesn't matter how much CO2 we burn or emit in Canada, because he believes that Canada is entitled to more. And people who share those views are these oil and gas CEOs. We've seen them come to Environment Committee, oblivious to the impacts that climate change are having on Canadians, and clearly they're against regulations to clean our fuels and on the industrial pricing mechanisms which are driving down our emissions and helping us meet our targets. Pierre Poilievre wants to cut taxes for millionaires. He wants to cut programs for hardworking Canadians. He doesn't care about facts and the oil and gas CEOs that are helping him drive these campaigns. Every time he hosts another fundraiser with an oil and gas millionaire, he gets to host another Axe the Facts rally in some small town to spread misinformation to Canadians. That needs to stop, and I'm demanding accountability from Pierre Poilievre. If he's willing to talk to the media, I know that he's saying that he won't talk to some members of the media, but if he's willing to talk to some, then I want to know what his plans are with respect to clean fuel regulations and the industrial pricing mechanisms which are driving down our emissions in Canada. Thank you.
On the topic of fundraisers, I understand that the Liberal Party is kind of walking back their decision to not hold fundraisers in private homes, in part to catch up with the Conservatives on fundraising. Do you think that that's an ethical lapse? What do you think of that?
Well, look, as a candidate, I have to run a campaign, and thankfully our campaigns in Canada are not like they are in the United States, and we don't rely on big corporate donors. But when Pierre Poilievre entertains these giant fundraisers with oil and gas CEOs, those CEOs have the ability to basically tell other people who are connected to that business to donate. That's in effect a super PAC. That's in effect a mechanism where a specific industry or sector is driving people's campaigns. So the Liberal Party will remain steadfast and ethical with respect to how we appeal to Canadians to make small donations so that we can run our modest campaigns as compared to what we've seen from the Conservatives and these super PACs down in the United States, while Pierre Poilievre continues to meet with these oil and gas CEOs and corporate millionaires to achieve his objectives of cutting taxes for millionaires, driving up our emissions, and stripping away the programs and the benefits that Canadians rely on.
And what would you say to his argument that the United States doesn't have the same programs as Canada, and therefore these climate programs are pushing investment to the United States and moving it from Canada?
It would be one thing if that were true, but it's factually incorrect. What we've seen is a ton of growth in the green sectors that are driving innovation through the natural transition away from fossil fuels. These programs are not just good for affordability, they're actually excellent for our economy as well. We've seen growth in Ontario with respect to the battery and electric vehicle value chain. We've seen renewable energy projects right across this country. And just a couple of months ago, I was at CHEO, which is the Children's Hospital here in Eastern Ontario in Ottawa, to announce almost $1 million for heat pumps so that they can move away from fossil fuels with respect to their enclaves and all of their heating and their hot water. And we see that when you price carbon, when you put a price on pollution, that drives innovation and it drives us toward that green transition, which makes Canada happier, healthier, wealthier, and stronger, and it helps us achieve our emissions targets as well.
Just one more thing, just back on the fundraisers. How can it be that your party thought it was unethical to have private fundraisers in homes a couple of years ago, and now you think it's ethical? How did that shift happen?
Well, what's unethical is having these sector-driven fundraisers, whereby Pierre Poilievre is entertaining millionaire CEOs in private homes, in boardrooms, and charging $1,600 a ticket, and having those interests reflected directly into their campaign. And what we've seen in the House of Commons is that misinformation spread through the work that they're doing in the House of Commons, and it's really troubling to see. It's basically an oil and gas lobby. We've seen the oil and gas lobby find a home within the Conservative Party of Canada. Thanks.
Who was allegedly killed by police.
I actually haven't heard about that specific case to be able to comment on that case yet.
No problem. The AFN National Chief is asking for Indigenous oversight into situations where Indigenous people are in police custody and facing violence. So what are your thoughts on that more generally?
Well, absolutely, and certainly we found through the study of the red dress or the status of women committee that there's a lot of mistrust of police. We know that systemic racism in policing persists throughout the country, whether it's with the RCMP or with municipal police services. That needs to be addressed as possible.
You introduced a bill today, correct, on residential school denialism. Tell us a little bit about what the bill is and what you're hoping to achieve.
Well, what the bill aims to do is to add to the criminal code in section 318. Residential school denialism, condoning, denying, downplaying, justifying the residential school system.
And so people would face criminal charges if they did that?
Yes, it would. Yes, it would amend the current criminal code to add residential school denialism.
How do you think this will help in terms of reconciliation?
Well, we know that the TRC came out around 10 years ago. At that time, there was a greater awareness of the true history of genocide in the country, a genocide that was recognized unanimously in the House of Commons. But we know in recent years there's been an increasing amount of residential school denialism. Survivors, families, and communities deserve to be protected, and that's exactly what this bill aims to do.
And as we come up to Monday, September 30th, for the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, as we look back on some of these calls to action from the TRC, what kind of progress would you like to see more from the government in specifically addressing the calls to action?
Well, we're talking about the calls to action from the TRC, and quite frankly, First Nations continue to not have minimum rights upheld, minimum rights that are articulated in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, something that was mentioned 16 times in the Truth and Reconciliation report. It's time for this government, this Liberal government, to uphold the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as has been affirmed in Bill C-15, and ensure that the minimum human rights for Indigenous peoples throughout Canada are upheld. There will never be justice in this country without, or reconciliation in this country, or justice without truth, and until such time as they deal with the ongoing and willful human rights violations being perpetrated by this Liberal government.
Ms. Kazan, may I ask you more specifically about boil water advisories? Certainly many have been lifted, but there's a long way to go, some would say. Where are we at in your eyes on the progress on lifting all of the advisories?
Well, the fact in this country that it's so normalized that Indigenous communities don't have clean drinking water, that we're talking about clean drinking water in an incremental way, speaks to the failure of this government to really be committed to reconciliation in this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
What's going on with that chirp? Help me understand why you keep saying that about Mr. Poilievre.
Well, it may actually be very unfair of me, and I'm willing to withdraw it because the Conservatives are always asking me to withdraw it. I've checked Pierre Poilievre's work record, and I haven't found that he actually ever worked anywhere before he became a professional political young rat and then party leader. Apparently, he worked at Dairy Queen at some point.
Where'd you read that? Where'd you get that from?
Well, I also heard he had a paper route, so I'm just trying to clarify. Is the only work experience Pierre ever had was at Dairy Queen in the summer? people want to know. Inquiring minds.
On the comment in the House of Commons yesterday, Conservatives are kind of saying it wasn't a homophobic slur, that it may have been misheard, that they were speaking to the meetings in general that the Prime Minister had referred to. Do you accept that argument back from the Conservatives, and what do you expect of the Speaker today?
I heard the comment on the tape. It's pretty clear. Maybe the Conservatives don't have a problem with that because they just are used to these kind of homophobic slurs, but we're talking about the House of Commons. We're talking about a Prime Minister of the country. It's just degraded and debased behavior, and I would think that the person who did it, who's been filmed saying it, would have the decency to say, I apologize for just being a juvenile moron.
Mr. Angus, they have a national chief calling for Indigenous oversight into the investigation of a death who was in police custody in Calgary. Do you have any thoughts on what should be done to address police brutality towards Indigenous people?
We have serious needs to address outstanding questions. Certainly in Northern Ontario, the horrific deaths of young people and the failure of Thunder Bay Police has received many concerns. I think when a case like this happens, we need to have a liaison with First Nations so that we can reassure the community that everything is being done to keep in terms of justice. The other issue that we are dealing with is a rising level of chaotic violence because of the opioid crisis, and we need to work better to include mental health teams and police together on the streets.
And how are you finding overall the tone of Parliament right now? Some people are saying it's the worst it's ever been. I feel like we've been talking about this for probably the last 5 or 6 years.
Well, I mean, I've seen a lot of dumbed down behavior in Parliament. I think what's problematic is that it really does come from the leader of the Conservative Party is very thin-skinned, and his attacks are very personal, and I think it lowers the overall tone. Prime Minister Harper was a hard guy to debate, but he usually had his thugs behind him doing the nasty work. Pierre Poilievre prefers to do it himself, and I think that changes the tone in the House.
But what about everybody's chirping, right? Like you're chirping, you hear the Liberals chirp. I mean, is it really just fair to say it's the Conservatives?
Heckling has always been there. I mean, the idea that we're all supposed to sit there as choir boys and girls, to me, is not democratic. But it's the viciousness of the comments that is problematic, and the polarizing language that's problematic, because this is what we're finding on the streets now. I mean, I get death threats from people who are repeating the kind of slurs that they hear in the House because they believe it's true. That's problematic, and we need to dial that back.
You're going to see you're going to keep chirping him as Dairy Queen boy then? You're having a problem with the tone, but you keep chirping him as Dairy Queen boy. Some guys think that's pretty childish.
I don't think I'm chirping. I think I'm trying to clarify. Has a guy ever worked for a living? I don't know.
Is working at Dairy Queen not a respectable job?
I actually think working at Dairy Queen is very important, and I certainly wouldn't want to undermine anyone who's ever worked at Dairy Queen, but I don't know if Pierre Poilievre ever did. I think the man is fundamentally unfit for public office because I don't think he has a track record of ever being out in the real world. So I've asked him, where have you ever worked? I mean, I can say where I worked. I was a carpenter.
Isn't being a politician a respectable profession?
Well, I think when you're going to be leader of a country, you need to bring some life experience. I mean, he attacks the Prime Minister. They go after the Prime Minister for being a drama teacher. I mean, I never even made it out of high school. I was a punk rock musician, but I did work in all manner of jobs, and I could hold my record up, and I bring that life experience. Pierre Poilievre doesn't bring that.
What are some of the slurs that you've heard?